Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Fronteras, a Changing America. I'm Edmundo Resendez. Today, we take a look at New Mexico's economic development in 2014 and what we can expect in 2015, in particular, the outlook for southern New Mexico. My guest is Jon Barela, who is the Cabinet Secretary for the New Mexico Economic Development Department. He was appointed by Governor Susana Martinez and confirmed unanimously by the New Mexico State Senate. Secretary Barela, welcome. And a homecoming of sorts for you to be here in our studios.
Edmundo, it's good to be back at KRWG in Las Cruces. You know, I grew up here, had the opportunity to work here at KRWG during my high school years and one summer in college, so it's a homecoming for me. Congratulations, 50 years of great public service and great programming. Listened to your station quite a bit on the FM dial, and of course watch NewsView. It used to be called NewsView 22.
Yes, yes.
Back in the days, I guess it still is. So it's great to be back.
You know, having been raised in this area and having seen the university grow, I mean, you're able to really have a unique perspective for southern New Mexico and its growth and its economic development over the years.
This university is a vital cog in the economic development efforts and workforce development efforts in our state and obviously this region. But the quality of students that we see coming out of NMSU, and I speak during my years too, when I worked in the private sector, is fabulous, and the people here at the college and NMSU do a fabulous job educating these young people. Matter of fact, so much so 2 of my 3 kids have been students here at NMSU, so we send them down here.
That's great, that's great. Well, I do want to talk a little bit about how education plays a role in economic development and, you know, working in, you know, keeping the brain drain, you know, from happening so much, and, you know, bringing businesses that can do that. But I do want to start out, you know, as the state's official head cheerleader, what challenges do you face in promoting business relocation and location into New Mexico?
Well, the business of job creation, economic development is ultra competitive. We're not only competing with states in our country, we're competing very, very ferociously with countries around the world. And you're dead right on. Workforce development and education is one of the key ingredients in being competitive and in attracting jobs, whether it be expansion of existing companies or relocations. A number of factors go into it. I talk about 10 principles for optimizing economic development, and workforce and education is certainly one pillar of those principles and how we are able to attract and keep jobs here in our state.
What can you report, looking back at 2014, it seems like it was just yesterday, we were just getting into 2014, but what report can you give us on the state of the economic development for New Mexico in 2014, in particular looking at the southern part, you know, Alamogordo, Las Cruces, Ruidoso, and also, of course, Silver City?
Well, I think the southern part of the state has been doing better in many respects. It has a more diversified economy. The challenge we've had in Edmundo, not only in the past few years, but really in the past decade or 2 or 3 or 4, is this incredible reliance New Mexico has on the federal government and on federal spending. Earlier this year, or last year, the Washington Post put out a great story about the states that are the most reliant on the federal government, and they were ranked accordingly. New Mexico was at the top of that list as the most reliant state on the federal government. On the heels of that report, another econometrics firm put out a study ranking New Mexico's private sector as the most reliant on the federal government. And you know, that's a challenge for us here. We've put all our eggs in really 1 or 2 economic development baskets, and we need to diversify our economy. We need to make it more competitive so that we aren't so reliant upon the federal jobs cutbacks and some of the budgetary challenges that have a very strong ripple effect on all states, but a very, very strong wave effect on a state like ours.
You know, I've worked in the private sector here in Las Cruces for the last 10 years or so, and one of the challenges I heard from a lot of businesses is that they face a workforce challenge in trying to find qualified people, particular as they look to some of the people that should be working for some of these local companies moving away, going somewhere else. And when you're 23, nobody blames you for wanting to expand your wings and go try something else. And so I've heard about some of these challenges that some of these businesses have. What kind of challenges do you hear from seeing some of these businesses really wean away New Mexico from the federal dollar?
Yeah. Well, when it comes to workforce development, sadly, this is an issue that's not only unique to New Mexico, but I hear it from colleagues around the country. There are a number of states and a lot of communities around the country that have this workforce development challenge. Our country is faced with what I consider to be a developing, if not actual, crisis in educating our youth, even our adults, in STEM fields: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We have a shortage of this. We have countries that are eclipsing us very aggressively in these aspects of it. But even more basic skills are things that we are focused on. Matter of fact, Governor Martinez, through executive order, set up a employability partnership group that consists of cabinet colleagues from, amongst other departments, Workforce Solutions, Department of Education, Department of Higher Education, myself, Department of Health, to name a few. But it's a private sector driven board. It's dominated by people from small business in particular. They are telling us, the private sector is telling us, what do we need to do as an administration, as these variety of departments, on how we can better educate these workers. And most recent project we have embarked upon is doing a survey of employer needs, skills gaps, and how we can go about funding programs to fill those skill gaps here in New Mexico. And we've embarked upon that already, and we're attacking it quite aggressively.
The New Mexico Workforce Department of Solutions came out with a report for the month of October looking at unemployment rates. And one, again, in southern New Mexico, the area that we cover here at KRWG was Deming. Came in at 11.3 or 5%. And one of the challenges that I read from the local economic development office is that they were trying to put a workforce training, but they had to cancel it because of lack of registrations. Do you see that as a problem in trying to attract business into our communities? The lack of willingness to work in some of these companies that have pretty good, capable jobs.
We have an interesting dynamic going on, again, not only in Luna County and in Deming, but we have pockets of the state where we have relatively higher unemployment as opposed to the other parts of our state. And we have targeted those areas for assistance. We have formulas for our Job Training Assistance Program and our Local Economic Development Act grants, where we actually provide proportionally higher amounts of funding to those areas. So we have targeted those areas for help and development. It's a curiosity to me on that. We are making progress. We do try to direct companies. We've had some successes, not as many as we'd like to see in those areas, but we are starting to see some ripple effects from our border development initiatives take hold. Certain sectors are actually growing in places like Luna County. But let's be honest, the unemployment rate's still too high, and we're doing what we can to help those communities. The good news is that Doña Ana County is doing better. Certainly the South County, Santa Teresa, is seeing a boom. Thousands of new jobs have been created over the last 4 years. We're seeing growth in Otero County, which is almost at full employment. And we've seen a nice comeback in Grant County and Hidalgo County because of the new border crossing, or the improved border crossing there at Antelope Wells is seeing a little bit of increase in traffic and retail trade.
What bright spots did you see in 2014 for some of these southern counties that really surprised you the most that we're able to attract economic development?
Well, we can start with Santa Teresa and the border area. It's rippling up to the North County and the Central County here, including Las Cruces. Thousands of jobs have been created. You know, Edmundo, the thing that really excites me and that we should be very proud of is the fact that for the first time in the history of our state, our trade with Mexico has exceeded $1 billion. When we took office 4 years ago, it stood at $424 million. That was trade with Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
There were East Coast states, very similar in size, that were doing more business with the Republic of Mexico than we were doing here in our own state, despite our cultural similarities and very much the synergies that we have economically speaking with our neighbors to the south. Well, $424 million is what we started with. We've exceeded $1 billion, record-breaking trade overall here in New Mexico, and record-breaking trade with our Mexican neighbors. What does that mean? It means that according to the U.S. Department of Commerce, the International Trade Administration, the $1 billion mark creates about 6,500 private sector jobs throughout New Mexico. So we're very, very proud of that. And across the range of sectors, manufacturing, logistics, distribution, transportation, value-added food production, and agriculture are leading the way. So we're very excited about that. That's the bright spot, a great bright spot. The other great bright spot is Otero County, which is their local leaders and officials are doing a great job marketing Alamogordo and even Chaparral. We've had some announcements even there, and we've been very successful. As I said earlier, Otero County is reaching full employment. They've done a nice job diversifying their economy. We have a growth again in these other counties as well. You know, mining's making a comeback in Silver City, and so again, we've seen an increase in mining jobs in Grant County. Again, we have a ways to go, but we're working hard to make sure we get there.
What about, I don't want to call it a dark spot, what about, you know, some challenges? What challenges did you see happen that prevented some jobs from coming into some of these areas?
Yeah, we continue to get hit hard. If you go at the monthly reports that are put out by the Department of Labor, the Department of Workforce Solutions, which are put out by the U.S. Department of Bureau of Labor Statistics, we continue to see a large drop-off in primarily federal government employment, and also small businesses that are impacted by the cutbacks from Washington. That continues to be a challenge. You know, we have a large footprint of federal activity in our state. We have White Sands Missile Range down south. We have the NASA test site. We have even Fort Bliss, which extends into New Mexico and other big federal agencies. So that is something that's hit us hard. That employment has dropped dramatically. In the last 4 years, lost 10% of that workforce here in New Mexico. And of course, there's that ripple effect in the private sector, as I alluded to earlier. So that's the big cloud that's hanging over our head. Our private sector actually continues to grow. It's something we want to increase, the private sector job growth, certainly. But the last report, year over year, had 1.1% overall growth, despite the difficulties we've seen at the federal level.
What new businesses that are planning or committed to coming in, you know, what type of what do they represent? What type of businesses are they? And you know, what areas are they coming into? I know that Santa Teresa has seen some pretty good growth.
Yep, Santa Teresa and the border area is a little bit of a microcosm of what we're starting to see around the state, in particular here in southern New Mexico. The sectors that we're starting to see excellent growth in are as follows: the warehousing, distribution, logistics, transportation sectors. We're seeing growth in some high-tech industries, even down south. Everybody thinks that the metro area of Albuquerque is the hub of that, and it is, but we're seeing growth here in Doña Ana County of firms that are looking to expand and relocate. We're seeing growth in value-added food production and agricultural products. And manufacturing is making a comeback, which is the sector that I am most excited to see come back. They're all very, very important. But if we can get manufacturing back on its feet, we're going to see some nice spin-off effects. The salaries and the benefits in that sector are particularly competitive, and that would we will see, I think, a related rise in salaries and of course benefits that are provided in that particular sector.
In the time you've been economic secretary, has there been one business that was really satisfying for you to attract into New Mexico, whether it be in the South or wherever throughout the state, that really you saw everything come together and that really was satisfying to go home and feel like celebrating?
There's probably not one that we celebrate. We celebrate all of them. We've had successes in attracting and expanding businesses. It's always great and it's always victorious when you have a company relocate locate to New Mexico. In some cases we've had companies relocate, leave our state, come back. But I'm very, very gratified and probably pleases personally me the most when we see a small business expand and do very well. In particular, businesses that had a choice. They hit a growth trajectory where they have to make a decision, Edmundo. They either stay in New Mexico or they choose to leave our state. In the past, all too often, when they got to that growth trajectory, they would leave our state. More and more, we're seeing companies stay. They stay for a variety of reasons: a more competitive tax environment, a reasonable regulatory environment. But we now have closing fund monies available to help keep these companies here so that we can invest in these small businesses that are growing with our state to keep them here. That has bipartisan support. And of course our job training monies, which we've been able to bolster, again in a bipartisan way, which also helps these companies train their employees.
What key challenges do you face in when you do have one that got away? Do they offer reasons as to why they could not do their business here in New Mexico?
You learn a lot. You learn a lot from your victories, but you learn an equally amount of valuable lessons when companies decide to not choose New Mexico. I'm glad to report we've had recently a lot more successes and victories than we have had losses. But typically, when a company chooses not to be in New Mexico, they will cite sometimes location. They will cite sometimes the workforce, technical skills occasionally comes up. Sometimes it's a matter of timing. Very often what I'm finding now in particularly Doña Ana County is a lack of immediate space. Very often we'll get a call from an economic development professionals, we'll get a call from a business looking to relocate, and they need 100,000 square feet of office or warehousing space, industrial space, ready to go, vacant building. We don't have that anymore, especially here in Doña Ana County, especially in Santa Teresa. When we took office, there was 800,000 square feet, roughly, of open industrial office and warehousing space. Edmundo, today, we have less than 8,000. So we need to encourage developers to develop some spec space, available space, in particularly this area, so that we have something ready to go and available for these businesses looking to expand.
What role does the current drought and water play in promoting New Mexico as a whole to businesses that might have questions about that?
It's a great question. It's something that we have to be prepared for in the short and longer term. The most sobering, or one of the most sobering briefings I've had since I've been on this job came from a gentleman by the name of Dr. Mike Hightower, who's a scientist up at Sandia National Labs. Basically told me we're in about year 30 of a 300-year drought cycle here in New Mexico and in latitudes around the world where New Mexico sits. So it's going to be a long-term challenge. and despite the recent rains we've had, it's still going to be a longer term challenge. We view this as an opportunity. I'm talking about the administration, the governor, our department, and I've talked about this many times and how we can use New Mexico, and I want to commend New Mexico State University, its professors, its leadership, and the Water Research Institute here on campus, who, by the way, we were able to get a little more money to, but we can use institutions like NMSU and the Water Institute to make New Mexico a center for water research excellence and commercialize the technology with respect to water conservation and water technology. We have a template. Israel has created tens of thousands of jobs. They did it out of necessity. We're at that point now, and happy to report we are commercializing some of these first ideas coming out of the country, and we're looking at working closely with the labs and NMSU and others to commercialize water-saving conservation technology. So I want to make this crisis into an economic development opportunity, and we're trying to lead the way on that. And of course the governor has led the way too on calling for infrastructure to help with these water projects. It starts there. When we took office, there wasn't enough water for fire suppression in Santa Teresa, for example, and we were able to get, through bipartisan help, money to help with water suppression, and now we have a 10-year, not only water suppression taking care of public safety needs, but we have a 10-year water availability supplied based on projected growth down there. But so it's been a challenge, but we also view it as an opportunity as well.
As we look forward towards January and the upcoming legislative session, what will you be looking to accomplish with the legislature in trying to either maintain some of the incentives that you have and perhaps create some additional incentives?
Well, we're going to start with looking at some further tax relief for small businesses. That's one initiative we'll be looking at. We are happy to report we have excellent bipartisan support for the initiative to increase our job closing fund here in New Mexico through what's called our Local Economic Development Act. And what that essentially does is provide us with the tools to help with land building and infrastructure, which leads to direct job creation. When we took office, there was zero money in that account. We had $3.3 million the fiscal year before last. It was increased to $15 million, and bipartisan support, administration support for a $50 million fund. Texas has hundreds of millions of dollars in a similar account, so that'll help us remain competitive. Job training incentive program will be another big initiative that we will embark upon. Make sure that fund remains solvent, strong bipartisan support there. And the one program that I really want to emphasize this year in this year's legislative session is making sure that we have a dramatic increase in funding our Main Street programs. Your viewing audience, I know, is familiar with the Main Street program. We have a Main Street program in just about every county in southern New Mexico and in many communities in southern New Mexico. So we are going to push for a dramatic increase of that. Alamogordo is our newest community in your listening area, in your viewing area. And
I've kept track with the Silver City community, right. So I see that program actually develop. And
isn't it amazing? And I have to congratulate the people of Silver City. 3 years ago, they were ranked as the best Main Street program in the entire country. Got a national award for that. And last year, earlier in the year, New Mexico Main Street as a whole, that's administered through our department, was ranked as the best Main Street program in the entire country. So we're very, very proud of that. The ROI that we put into that has great dividends, and I'm going to have a particular focus, and so will the governor, on that.
One of the incentive programs that's out there that's you can call it new, you can call it somewhat new, or you can call it something that's been there for a while, but it's the film incentive program. Mm-hmm. Is that something that's up for discussion in the legislature this year, and is it something that you see having a good ROI for the state of New Mexico?
Well, the film industry is very, very important to our economy here in New Mexico. Our challenge is to make sure that Las Cruces shares, and the southern part of New Mexico, the entire southern part of New Mexico shares in that success, and that's one of the things that we're trying to push. We believe that the film industry is very much alive and well here in New Mexico. Several new productions were announced last year. We expect several more new ones, major productions from Hollywood to continue. We have a number of TV productions that have landed in New Mexico and will stay in New Mexico. As you know, during the last legislative session before last, we increased the credit for television productions to 30%, 25% for motion pictures. And we continue to see that as being a very successful element to our overall economic development and job creation strategy, and we're very proud to see that growth. And of course, what we were able to do with our capital outlay funds to get a set production facility here in Doña Ana County, thanks to the local delegation here in Doña Ana County, we were able to set aside some capital outlay money for a production facility here in Doña Ana County.
As we wrap it up, I want to thank you for coming in, Secretary Barela, for coming in and doing what you do, and hope to have you back again soon. And again, you know, we almost ran out of time because I really wanted to talk about the brain drain. And I think that, you know, one of the things about the film incentive program, as I've seen, is some of the students wanting to hang around southern New Mexico and upon graduation. So, you know, it's definitely interesting to see that.
Well, Edmundo, it's an honor to be back here at KRWG. It's an honor to serve in this capacity, and it's always great seeing you. Thanks for inviting me here today.
Okay. Our guest has been Cabinet Secretary for the New Mexico Economic Development Department, Jon Barela, here on Fronteras, a Changing America. I'm Edmundo Resendez. Thank you for joining us today.